So hello everyone, welcome back to the Pytest automation series. Just a minute. So in the previous episode, we successfully implemented the data-driven testing using the CSV file. Uh, so we created some data in CSV manually, and then we run our uh, framework. So yesterday we were using just a minute. Let me go to the. Uh, so yesterday when we try to implement our data driven testing using CSV file and a fixture. Now, so we were able to read multiple usernames and password from the CSV file and execute the login functionality. Now, even though that approach worked, but it had a major limitation, and the limitation was that all the test data was executing inside the single browser. Like all this data, as we see yesterday, it was executing inside the single browser. So just a minute. Mm, uh, I think so. Now, as we can see, our test run only two times, even though we had three data, and the reason was that in the single session, all the three username and password was being tried on the login page for each browser, Edge and Chrome. So as I already told that even though that approach worked, but it had a major limitation. All the test data were executing inside the single test case using a for loop. No? And because because of that, PyTest is still considered as only one test. Now, if one iteration failed, like as we can see in Chrome and Edge, first login was passed, but the next two login failed. So even if one iteration failed, the remaining iteration, if passed, the whole overall result was being considered as failed. And if we see the HTML report, so even HTML report will just show single uh, test. Let me go to the report section to reveal. So sorry, I didn't give the reports command, so that's why the report was not generated. Uh, Anyways, even if we see the result, then still even in the sorry, report. In report also it will show just two test cases instead of six test cases. So now today we are going to improve our framework by replacing that approach by pytest.mark.parameterize, one of the most useful feature that is being provided by the pytest. So by the end of the episode, every row of the CSV will run separately on Chrome and browser. So overall, instead of just two test cases, we will have total of six test cases, and we can separately see which test case is passed or which is failed. Uh, Now let's look at the fixture that we created yesterday. So we had created this fixture where we created blank list. Then we open CSV data. Then we read the data from CSV. Then we append it in the list, and then we return that list in the login data. Sorry, test underscore login file. No. Now this fixture worked perfectly fine for our yesterday implementation, but now we are going to remove it completely. Uh, and now the question is, if it was working, then why we remove it? Because the answer lies in knowing the difference between fixture and parameterization, that we will see in just next couple of minutes. Okay. So let me comment it out all the lines so that we can parameterize. Yeah. So the fixture that we created yesterday is now kind of removed from our framework, and if we execute right now, if we give the command pytest, it won't consider it because it is commented out. No. So when it comes to fixture is mainly used to provide resources to our test, like browser or database connections, creating API clients, or setting up the test environment. These kinds of things. No. And fixer help us in preparing these kind of things before the test starts. So suppose we want Chrome browser before our test starts, so fixer help us in opening the browser. Now then once the browser is open, then the test is executed, and after the test is executed, fixer then close it. Yeah. And our browser fixer is perfect example because it creates browser, as you can see, then it gives to the test utilizes it, and then after the test is executed, it finally closes it. Um, However, our login credentials are not really resources. Our login credentials are not really resources. They are simply just test input data, or we can say test data. Uh, so whenever we want to execute the same test with multiple inputs like admin, username 123, user 12, PyTest already provides a dedicated feature for that we are going to use, and that is parameterization. So this is something that we are now going to use instead of yesterday fixture. Uh, So we will use parameterization, which is cleaner and more scalable than this fixture. Right. So the next question arises that if we have commented this fixture and PyTest has to read the CSV file, then how it is going to read the data? So for that, we are going to create a helper function. In the helper function, we will use parameterization. Uh, So since helper function is kind of function that is to be used by multiple files throughout the automation framework, so we can just create a in utils. So instead of writing the same piece of code multiple times, we will move it into a separate function inside the helper function, and we will call it whenever we need it. And in today's episode, the only responsibility of helper function will be to read the data from CSV file and return it. So since the responsibility is reading data from CSV file, so we are going to name the file similarly data underscore reader.py. Okay. So, yeah. So we have created helper function inside utils. We will now write a function inside this, and it will just read the data from CSV file and return it, nothing more, nothing less. Since it is not creating any browser is being handled by fixture in conf test.py. It does not perform any tear down, or it does not have any dependency on pytest, and it does not need to be fixture also anymore. It is just simply Python function. No. So before we start creating the helper function, let me tell you some advantage of the helper function. First, our code become reusable. Correct. Since we are defining it inside the utils folder and it can be used throughout the automation, so obviously that makes our code reusable. And if tomorrow we create another test like searching employees or adding user, we can simply call the same helper function instead of rewriting the CSV logic again and again. No. Second is that our test files become cleaner because they only focus on testing, not reading the files. Okay. And third is that our framework becomes easier to maintain. So if the CSV reading logic changes, then we have to update only one place. Every test that is going to use this helper function will get the updated implementation by itself. Now, so these are some of the advantage of that. Now there are some disadvantage also. So disadvantage is that unlike fixtures, they don't support so unlike fixtures, they don't support setup and tear down. Like in our browser fixer, we can see it is supporting our setup and tear down, but that is not the case with the parameterization. We cannot again use the scope like that we use the fixer some like section class. No. Module, etc. but that's also perfectly fine because helper function don't need this kind of scope for implementation. So these were some of the advantage and disadvantage. Now, as we have already discussed it, so let's go ahead and create the function. Now, I've already named it as data underscore reader.py because the primary role of this file will be to read the data and return it data from read the data from CSV and return that data. So as we are going to read the data from CSV, so first we have to import the CSV file, and this very first line is going to import the built-in CSV module in the Python, and it helps us reading the CSV file without writing in custom passing logic. No. So once we import the CSV file, then we have to start with the function name and definition. So let's write function name as get login data. Uh, we are using standard generic name so that in future if anyone sees the code on GitHub repo, then they can easily understand what this function is doing. So def get underscore login underscore data means that we are just reading the data from CSV and we are returning that. And here we are not using any, as I already told you, it is not fixture, so we are not going to use the decorator at the rate pytest dot fixture. No, this is not going to be used here. This is just a helper function. Next we are going to create empty list. No. Like yesterday we will again store all the username and password from the CSV file. No, but for now it is empty. Now again we will open the CSV file just like yesterday we did with open. No. First move to test data folder, then move to login underscore data dot CSV as file. No. Now here we are opening the CSV file, and with I already told yesterday with statement automatically close the file after we are done with reading it. No. So we don't have to call the file dot close manually. We don't have to use file dot close after reading all the data. That will be handled with keyword specific by itself. And this is one of the standard practice in Python for opening the file. So once that is done, then we will start reading the data. Uh, CSV dot. Now, so far, if we see these three lines are common to the fixture that we created yesterday. Uh, and instead of, as I already told yesterday, instead of returning the values by index, this return every row as a dictionary. So if our just a minute, if our CSV file data looks like this username and password, then this particular line will be returning the data as username Yeah. Uh, and this makes our code much more readable instead of remembering by column name and row. No, we can simply access the values by using some meaningful keys. No, so the next line will be again same like yesterday fixture that we are going to iterate for every row in the CSV data for row in reader. Now, so we are looping through every row inside the CSV file, and so far our CSV file contains three row of data, so it will iterate three times. Now, and the loop will execute three times. After that, we have to append the data. Now, yesterday we were appending simply as a row, but now today we are going to append it in row username. Now this is just a small change from yesterday code, and this is important change because previously we were storing dictionaries, no, but now we are storing tuples. Okay, and why we are storing tuples? Because the, the pytest dot mark dot parameterize that we are going to use for parameterization expect iterables of values like and returning tuples. When we are returning tuples, it makes it very easy for pytest to unpack each username and password into a separate parameters. No. So our final CSV data will look like, just a minute. So when we are re- mm, returning tuples, so yeah, our CSV file will data will look like this. This all three data will be in double quote. No, okay. And in the rest of the two data will also be in double quotes. So once our data is appended, so just like yesterday, we are going to return the data, and this is simply going to return the list, complete list. Now to whosoever help call this helper function. Uh, in our case, it will be pytest.mark.parameterize. So far we have done removing the fixture from footage.py, creating a helper function, defining the helper function in the file, and now we will modify our test underscore test file. Okay. Now previously our code was looking like this. we were manually looping over every row. This means that PyTest only saw a single test. Now, and even though we have three sets of data still, and login was successful for one set of data, and in the next two it failed, still the test was considered as failed. Now, and this is exactly we are going to fix this today. Now, so the first thing we are going to do is we are going to import our helper function. So to import the helper function from utils dot data underscore reader dot py. Import get underscore login or yeah, login and we don't have to use the Python database. Now, instead of getting data from a fixture, we will directly call our helper function. Now, what we have to do, we have to add the most important line for today, and that is we are going to add the decorator, and that decorator will define our parameterization, and that will be pytest dot mart dot parameterize. Yeah. And here we are define the arguments, which is and then our helper function name. Oh, we have to import the pytest also. Import pytest. Okay. Now let's see what exactly this line is doing. So this line is doing something really powerful. Like it tells the pytest that I have multiple sets of data. Now username password, and for every username password returned by this function, please generate a separate test. And if our helper function returns three rows, pytest will automatically create three independent traces. Now no loop is required. Now the next, in the next line we are defining our function name. So here again the code will change, and instead of just a minute, login data, now we are going to use username comma password, because we don't need fixer now. Now after we remove the login data, we are adding username and password. So pytest will automatically pass one username and one password for every generated cases. So for the first execution, or we can say iteration, it will receive the data as admin123, then next two sets of data, username 123, password 123, username 12, password 12. And we never have to write a single loop. Now inside the code, our code becomes much simpler. So as I already said that we don't need running the loop for each set of data, so we have to remove it now. And since we are removing the loop, so we also don't need a row. We just have to use the username and password, so our code become much simpler now. That's it. No iteration, no indexing. Everything is handled by PyTest. One thing to notice is that I also remove delete all cookies now. Yesterday we were using delete all cookies, but today we don't need it now. And we added it because all the login attempts were happening in the same browser session. Without clearing the cookies, the next login could inherit the previous user session, and that was leading to some inaccurate results, we can say. Now we don't need it anymore, and the reason is each parameterized test will get a fresh execution. Now your driver fixer will open a new browser before the test and will close it after the test. So every login starts with a clean browser setup. No, there is nothing left to clean manually. No, and that makes our framework much simpler and avoid unnecessary thoughts. So let's run and see if it is working or not. So I will just leave the. Oh, sorry. This is the mistake that I do every day. So it is showing some error. Let me check. Hmm, Okay. Let me add extra pair of braces. Oh, oh. Yeah. So I hope now this time the code will run. Yeah, it is now working. So our expectation is that our test will run 6 times, 3 times for Chrome, 3 times for Edge, and for each Chrome and Edge it will pass one time as our username and password is valid, and it will fail 2 times for each browser as their invalid credential. So let's see if it is working according to our expectations or not. So as I had expected, our test case should pass for a single row of data. That is this one for Edge and Chrome. So that's why our two test cases are passed. And then these are invalid credentials. So it is been failed for Chrome and Edge, and hence our four test cases are failed. So now we can see for every row of data, separate browser session is used for executing the test. Now, before wrapping up today's session, now let's understand the core, core concept behind everything that we had implemented. So, uh, so today we implemented parameterization. So let's understand the core concept behind everything that we have implemented. So basically, parameterization means running same test, uh, same test multiple times with different input data. So that we are doing uh, our test underscore login, and we are executing it for three sets of data separately on two browser. Now, so let's think of this way. Now, just a minute. Let me go to my CSV file and copy paste the. Now, so let's think of this way that and these are three sets of data. Now, so these are our three sets of data for login page, and I want to test it for separately for three different users. Now, one approach can be to write separate test case for each of the test data, like just different test case for each input. Now, so we can say, let's suppose test underscore login underscore user 1, we define our test case. Then test underscore login underscore user 2, we define our second test case. Then test underscore login underscore user 3. That's one approach where we write three separate test cases, and each test cases use a single set of data. Now this will work, and this will again give the same result that we just received now VS Code couple of minutes ago. But this is repetitive, and in this repetition the only thing that is changing in is the input data. Now the second approach is that using the loop. Second approach is using for loop. To write one test case and use a for loop that we did yesterday. So we can write something like for row in login data. This was implemented yesterday. No, but again we saw the limitation of this approach. No, even though this reduces the code duplication, but PyTest still see it as just single test case, and if the second iteration fails, then the debugging becomes difficult because overall the test is failed. Now, and this is where parameterization comes in. So instead of writing the multiple test case with different input data or using fixture, we can simply ask PyTest. uh, we can ask PyTest to generate test cases for us. So when we go back to our code and we see the logic that we had written, PyTest dot mark dot parameterize. So when we write this line, PyTest reads all the data returned by date underscore login underscore data and automatically creates separate test execution. Now, and our helper function becomes something like list with set of tuples data. So this is our list data, and in this list all this username comes as the set of tuples: admin 123, username 123, username 12. And if we see internally how it behaves, so it internally behaves like this, uh, that I already said that. So PyTest internally behaves as if we had written three separate test cases, and it will execute in that way. And the best part is that we only maintain one test function. Now, this one. So each generated test is completely independent. Now, each test case gets its own browser, has their own pass or fail, and they will appear in HTML report separately. we have not generated HTML report, but if we generate the HTML report, then we will see the same result that 4 are failed, 2 are passed. Now, and if one test failed, then the remaining test will continue on executing. Now, and again debugging becomes much easier because we know exactly which test case or which data set is failing. Now, if we have browser fixture that is parameterized for Chrome and Edge, PyTest combines both parameterization automatically. So overall, it becomes two browser. So overall, it becomes our two browser plus three credentials. Now, these are our three credentials, and we have two browsers, Chrome and Edge. So we have six sets of data, and these six sets of data are completely independent and all are created from a single test function. No, this one. And so we get result for six test cases. So the major lesson from today's session is that a loop execute multiple iteration inside one test. Now, but parameterization creates multiple independent tests from one test function without even loop. Uh, so that's the difference. What that makes the parameterization such a powerful and nice feature in PyTest. Now, if it also helps in keeping our code clean, improving the reporting, making the failure easy to identify. Uh, help us building the automation framework that can be scalable easily. Uh, so that's it for today. Now, so in the next episode, we will move beyond the loading page. So far, our automation framework is just revolving around the loading page. In the next episode, we will move beyond that and we will expand our framework by creating multiple page objects such as dashboard, admin, logout, whichever is available on the website to make our framework more look like a real life automation framework. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining. See you tomorrow.